For 5 years, Adana carried a child that refused to be born. No labor pains, no complications, just a swollen belly that never burst. Villagers whispered that she was cursed, but the truth was far worse, because one night, when the moon turned blood red, Adana heard a voice from inside her womb, a voice that did not belong to a baby, but to something else entirely. Adana was once the pride of her village, a beautiful, kind and hardworking young woman. She was the type of woman mothers pointed at and told their daughters to emulate. When she married Obinna, a wealthy and well-respected palm wine tapper, their union was celebrated with feasts that lasted for days. But joy turned to sorrow when, a year into their marriage, Adana remained childless. In a society where a woman's worth was often tied to her ability to bear children, whispers started to follow her. Maybe she is barren, some said. Maybe she angered the gods, others speculated. Then, one day, the news everyone had been waiting for finally came. Adana was pregnant. Her belly grew round, her skin glowed, and her husband walked with pride. But as months passed, something strange happened. The child did not come. 9 months turned to a year turned to 2. By the 3rd year, the whispers had turned to open fear. This is not normal, the village women said. She carries an abomination, the others warned. And yet, Adama remained hopeful. The child kicked. She could feel it moving inside her, but no labor pains came, no sign of birth. By the 5th year, people stopped speaking to her. Mothers put their children away when she passed. Some even swore that at night they heard voices coming from her heart, whispers that did not belong to this world. And then, on the night of the blood moon, everything changed. The night the moon bled red, Adana sat alone in her hut, staring at her swollen belly. The village had long abandoned her. Even her husband, Obinna, once a proud man, now barely looked at her. He spent his night drinking palm wine, refusing to come home. To him, she was a woman cursed, carrying something that should not exist. The air inside the hut was thick, unmoving. The only sound was the crackling of her oil lamp. Then, suddenly, the flames flickered. The shadows on the walls stretched unnaturally, twisting into strange shapes. A cold chill ran down her spine. Then, it happened. A whisper, faint yet unmistakable. "Mama." Adama's breath caught in her throat. She froze, eyes wide, heart pounding. The whisper came again, this time clearer. "Mama, why are you afraid of me?" Terror gripped her. This was no ordinary child. No baby should speak from the womb. Her hands trembled as she placed them over her belly. The moment she did, a strange warmth spread through her body, a feeling both soothing and terrifying. "It's time," their voice whispered, and then, for the first time in 5 years, pain ripped through her stomach, a searing, unbearable pain. Adana screamed. Outside, the wind howled, the earth trembled, the blood moon glowed brighter, and as she clutched her stomach, a dark figure appeared at her door, an old woman with eyes as white as milk. "The time has come," the woman said. "You must know the truth about the child you carry. Pain like fire, pain like death." Adana collapsed onto the cold earthen floor, clutching her belly as the searing agony racked her body. It was as if something inside her was tearing its way out. Yet no contractions came as they should. Her body trembled, drenched in sweat, her vision blurring. The old woman, with milky white eyes, stepped closer. Her presence, Both eerie and commanding, she knelt beside Adama, placing a wrinkled hand on her swollen stomach. A strange arm vibrated through the hair. "This is no ordinary birth," the woman murmured. "This child belongs to forces beyond your understanding. You must not scream, no matter what happens." But how could she not? The pain grew worse, spreading through her bones like molten lava. Then, something even more terrifying happened. Adana's belly shifted. Not the small subtle movement of a child quaking, but a full unnatural slither beneath her skin, as though something was crawling its way up. Her breath itched in horror as she saw the outline of tiny figures pressing against the inside of her belly, dragging downward as if searching for an exit. She tried to push, but there was no release, no relief, only torment. The wind outside howled louder. The walls of her heart trembled. The blood moon cast an eerie glow through the open window. And then the voice came again. "Mama, I'm ready." Adama gasped as an unseen force lifted her body slightly off the ground. The old woman began chanting in a language older than the village itself, her voice weaving through the air like a spell. Suddenly, the pain reached its peak, and with one final unbearable rip, the child came forth, but not as a child should. There was no blood, no umbilical cord, just silence, a deafening, unnatural silence. And when Adama finally looked down, the thing that had been inside her was staring right back at her. Adana's breath itched, her heart pounded against her ribs as she looked at the being before her. It was a child, but not entirely. The infant had the form of a newborn, a small body, delicate limbs, and deep brown skin, glistening as though kissed by moonlight. But its eyes, those eyes were unlike anything human, large, glowing, shifting between gold and deep crimson. They held knowledge, age, and an unsettling intensity that made Adana shudder. The child did not cry. Instead, it blinked up at her, its tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Then it spoke. "Mama, you finally see me." Adana recoiled, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. Her body trembled, torn between awe and terror. The old woman, who had been silent until now, let out a deep sigh. "It is as I feared," she murmured, running her aged fingers along the child's forehead. "This child is neither fully of this world nor the next." Adana's voice wavered. What do you mean?" The old woman turned to her, her white eyes filled with something that almost resembled sorrow. "You carry the blood of the forgotten ones, Adana, and your child is the bridge between the living and the unseen." Adana's pulse roared in her ears. "The forgotten ones?" The old woman nodded. "A long time ago, your bloodline was touched by spirits, beings neither human nor godly, but something in between. They do not die, they do not fade, and every few generations, one is born among you, a child who walks both realms." She looked down at the baby, her voice barely a whisper. "This is that child." Adana felt dizzy. Her body still ached from the unnatural birth, but the weight of the revelation was even heavier. She looked at her child again, searching for any sign of humanity. Then, for the first time, the baby smiled, a small, knowing smile. Outside, the wind stopped. The blood moon faded, the night fell into an eerie, absolute silence, and in that moment, Adana knew her life would never be the same again. Adana wrapped the child in a cloth, her hands shaking. She could barely comprehend what had just happened. 5 years of agony, whispers and isolation, and now this. A child that wasn't entirely human, a child that spoke, a child that had come with a price. The old woman rose to her feet, her cloudy eyes scanning the dimly lit earth. "You must leave this place," she said. Adana looked up sharply. "Leave? But why?" The old woman's voice was grave. "The village will not accept this child. They will fear it, and what people fear, they destroy." As if to confirm her words, a distant sound pierced their ear, the hurried footsteps of villagers shouting. Someone had seen the blood moon fade. Someone had sensed the shift in the wind, and now they were coming. Adana's chest tightened. No, they wouldn't. They would, the old woman interrupted. And they will. She stepped forward and pressed a small carved amulet into Adana's palm. "Take this. It will guide you to those who can protect the child." The baby cooed softly, blinking up at Adana with those strange shifting eyes. An unsettling warmth spread through her chest. Despite everything, despite the fear calling in her stomach, she loved this child. Outside, the voices grew louder. "Witchcraft!" someone shouted. "She has birthed an abomination." The first hand slammed against the hut door. The old woman grabbed Adana's wrist. "Go! Now!" Adana didn't hesitate. Clutching the baby tightly, she pushed through the back of the hut and into the night, her feet pounding against the damp earth. Behind her, torches lit up the darkness, casting monstrous shadows against the trees. They were chasing her. She ran. Branches scratched her skin, thorns tore at her feet. The baby didn't cry, only watched, silently, as though it understood. Then the amulet in her palm grew warm. A faint glow pulsed from it, illuminating a narrow path through the thick forest, a path she hadn't seen before. The old woman's voice echoed in her mind. "It will guide you to those who can protect the child." Adana took a shaky breath and stepped onto the path, disappearing into the darkness just as the villagers reached the clearing. Adana walked for hours, cradling the baby against her chest. The deeper she went into the forest, the quieter the world became. Even the crickets and night birds dared not sing. Then, suddenly, she saw it, a village hidden in the heart of the forest. But unlike her home village, this one felt different. The huts were built in intricate patterns, their roofs adorned with symbols that glowed faintly in the moonlight. At the center stood a grand temple, its entrance flanked by 2 stone guardians. Adana hesitated. Then, as if sensing her presence, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, tall and regal, her dark skin marked with golden symbols, her eyes, sharp and knowing, locked into Adana's. "You have brought the child," the woman said. Adana clutched the baby tighter. "Who are you?" "We are the keepers of the forgotten ones," the woman replied, "and we have been waiting for you." Adana's heart pounded as she stood before the regal woman. Behind her, the strange village was alive with flickering lights, quiet whispers, and a sense of knowing, a feeling that these people had been expecting her. "Who are you?" Adana asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman studied her for a moment before speaking. "My name is Ichara. I am the high priestess of this sanctuary. We are the last descendants of the forgotten ones, the guardians of children like yours." Adana swallowed hard. "Children like mine?" Ijara nodded and gestured for Adana to follow. As they walked through the village, Adana noticed the people around her. They looked normal at first glance, men, women, even children, but the more she looked, the more she noticed the differences. Some had eyes that shimmered like a child's, others moved with an unnatural grace, their feet barely disturbing the ground beneath them. A few had markings on their skin that pulsed faintly as though alive. The forgotten ones were beings who once walked among humans. Ijara explained, neither gods nor mere mortals. They were guardians, seers, and healers, but as human greed grew, they were betrayed, hunted, erased from history. Adana shivered. And my child? Ijara turned to face her. Your child is one of them, a bridge between the worlds, a being meant to restore balance. Adana tightened her grip on the baby. I don't understand. Why me? I am just a simple woman. Ijara's gaze softened. Because it is in your blood. You are a descendant of the forgotten ones, even if you did not know it. Adana's mind reeled. It all made sense now. The strange pregnancy, the whispers, the unnatural birth. What happens now? She asked, her voice trembling. Ijara's expression grew serious. The world will not accept this child. You have already seen how your village reacted. There are others, powerful people, who would seek to destroy your baby before they even understand its purpose. Adana clutched her child protectively. I won't let them. Then you must stay, Ijara said. Train, learn our ways, prepare the child for what is to come. Adana hesitated. She thought of Obinna, her husband, the life she had left behind, but deep in her heart, she knew there was no going back. She looked down at her baby, who glared up at her with glowing golden crimson eyes. The child blinked, and for the first time, she felt something beyond fear. Purpose. She turned back to Ijara and nodded. Teach me. Adana stayed in the sanctuary, learning the ways of the forgotten ones. She trained in healing, in understanding the unseen forces that shape the world, in protecting the child from those who would harm it. Her son, whom she named Ukemdili, meaning let mine be, grew quickly, developing abilities that both amazed and terrified her. He could see beyond the physical world, sense danger before it arrived, and at times his voice carried an unnatural power that made even the elders bow their heads in respect. But peace could not last forever. One night, as the wind howled through the trees, a scout arrived at the sanctuary with dire news. They have found us. Adana's blood ran cold. The same people who feared her child were coming to destroy him. The night air was thick with tension. Drums pounded in the distance, a slow, ominous rhythm that sent chills down Adana's spine. From the high walls of the sanctuary, she could see the flickering glow of torches approaching through the forest. They were coming, hundreds of them, warriors from nearby villages, hunters and men sent by powerful chiefs who feared what Ukemdili represented. Ijara stood at the center of the village, her golden markings glowing faintly in the moonlight. Beside her, the other elders murmured incantations, drawing symbols in the air that shimmered before vanishing. Adana, dressed in a warrior's tunic, tightened her grip on the dagger in her hand. She wasn't the same fearful woman who had fled her village in the dead of night. She had trained, she had learned, and she would fight. They come with iron and fire, Ijara said, her voice calm but heavy. But they do not understand what they face. Adana glanced at Ukemdili, now 5 years old, standing by her side. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, filled with an ancient wisdom that unsettled even her. He was calm, too calm for a child about to be hunted. "Mama," he said softly, "they will try to kill me." Adana's heart clenched, but she nodded. "Not if I kill them first." The attackers thought they were storming a simple village. They thought their swords and spears would be enough. They were wrong. The moment they stepped into the sacred grounds, the air shifted. The land itself seemed to reject them. Roots burst from the ground, twisting around their legs. Shadows moved unnaturally, stretching and consuming. The warriors hesitated, fear creeping into their ranks. Then a deafening roar echoed through the trees. From the darkness, the sanctuary warriors emerged, men and women wielding weapons forged in ancient fire, their bodies marked with the symbols of the forgotten ones, and leading them was Adana. She moved like the wind, her dagger flashing in the moonlight. The first warrior who launched the attack never even saw the blade until it was buried in his throat. Blood sprayed as he crumpled, and before his body hit the ground, Adana had already struck another. Screams filled the air. The sanctuary warriors fought fiercely, using not just their weapons, but the powers of the forgotten ones. Some called upon the wind, sending wild winds crashing into the enemy. Others controlled the earth, making the ground split open beneath their foes. But the attackers had their own weapons. From behind the front line, a group of men raised iron staffs engraved with forbidden symbols. The moment they slammed them into the ground, the air rippled. The sacred energy of the sanctuary faltered for a split second. And in that moment, chaos erupted. Adana turned just in time to see a warrior break through their defenses, charging straight toward Ikemdili with a raised spear. "No!" she screamed, too far away to stop him. But Ukemdili did not run. Instead, he lifted his tiny hand. The hair around him trembled, the torches flickered wildly. A strange guttural whisper filled the battlefield, a language older than time itself. And then the warrior stopped. His body went rigid, his eyes wide with terror. He let out a strangled gasp before collapsing, unmoving. Ukemdili had not touched him, he had only willed him to stop. The battlefield fell into stunned silence. Even the attacking warriors hesitated. Then, slowly, Ukemdili turned his glowing eyes toward the remaining enemies, and he spoke. "Live now, or be forgotten." The ground beneath them trembled. The sky darkened unnaturally. A wind that carried no mercy howled through the trees. Panic spread among the attackers. Some dropped their weapons and fled. Others fell to their knees, begging for mercy. The few who dared to remain were never seen again. By dawn, the battlefield was empty. The sanctuary stood victorious, but not without loss. Some of their warriors had fallen, and their blood soaked the sacred grounds. Adana knelt beside Ukemdili, brushing his curly hair back. He was unarmed but exhausted. His small body trembled from the power he had unleashed. Ijara approached, placing a hand on Adana's shoulder. "It has begun," she said softly. Adana knew what she meant. The world now knew of her child's existence. More would come, stronger enemies, greater threats. But she was no longer afraid, because she had seen what her son was capable of, and she knew no force in this world could stop him. The battle for the sanctuary was only the beginning. Word of the child who spoke death and bent nature to his will spread beyond the forest. The hunters and warriors who had fled spoke in hushed voices about the boy with glowing eyes, the one who commanded the winds and made men fall with a whisper. But with fear came fascination. The people who once hunted him now whispered his name with reverence. Some came searching for him, not as enemies but as seekers, drawn by a force they did not understand. They called him Ikemdili, the Eternal One. But while Ikemdili's legend grew, the world outside the sanctuary was falling apart. Kings waged senseless wars, hungry for power. The land withered in places where greed was strongest, and strange disturbances plagued villages, crops failing overnight, animals turning on their masters, entire rivers drying up without explanation. The elders of the sanctuary gathered. The balance is broken, Ijara said, tracing a symbol in the air that glowed briefly before fading. The forgotten ones stare. Adana frowned. I thought the forgotten ones were already gone, just remnants in our bloodline. They were never gone, Ijara corrected, only hidden, watching, but now they are restless. Their power is leaking into this world, and if we do not act, chaos will consume everything. Adana's heart pounded. What can we do? Ijara turned to Ukemdili. Not us, him. At just 7 years old, Ukemdili stood before the sacred temple, ready to embark on the journey no human had dared take for centuries. The sanctuary elders led him to the ancient portal, a stone archway covered in symbols too old to be deciphered. Beneath it, a pool of water shimmered, but it was no ordinary reflection. The surface rippled, revealing glimpses of another world, a realm of mist and shadow where unseen forces pulsed like a heartbeat. If you enter, Ijara warned, you may never return. Adana placed a hand on her son's shoulder. You don't have to do this. But Ukemdili only smiled, a small knowing smile. I was born to do this. Then, without hesitation, he stepped into the water and vanished. The spirit realm was unlike anything Ukemdili had imagined. It was neither dark nor light, neither warm nor cold. It was a place of whispers, where the wind carried the voices of beings long erased from history. You have come at last. The voice was everywhere and nowhere. Ukemdili turned and saw them, shimmering figures of immense power, their forms shifting between human and something other. Their eyes burned like stars, their presence heavy with ancient wisdom. You are our child, but you are also our reckoning, one of them said. The world has forgotten us, but its balance depends on us, another whispered, and now it is breaking. Ukemdili straightened. I have come to restore it. The forgotten ones studied him, their gazes piercing. Then one of them stepped forward. If you wish to restore balance, you must take your place as the bridge. You must open the path between our worlds, allowing harmony to return. Ukemdili hesitated. But won't that make me less human? A soft chuckle echoed. You were never just human. For 7 days, Ukemdili remained in the spirit realm, learning from the forgotten ones. They taught him the ways of balance, the secrets of creation and destruction, and the weight of power. Then they gave him a choice. You may return to your people, but you will never truly belong to them. Or you may stay here and rule among us, never to see your mother again. Ukemdili closed his eyes. He thought of Adana, of Ijara, of the sanctuary warriors who had fought for him. He thought of the world breaking apart and the suffering he had been born to end. When he opened his eyes, he knew his answer. I will return, but I will never stop walking between both worlds. The forgotten ones nodded, and with a single breath, they sent him back. When Ukemdili emerged from the sacred pool, he was no longer a child. He had aged, his body now that of a man, Though only a few weeks had passed in the human world, his eyes no longer shifted between gold and crimson. They now held the infinite depth of the cosmos. His power was absolute. With a wave of his hand, the land began to heal. Rivers that had dried up flowed again. Crops grew where famine had struck. The wind carried its whispers to warrior kings, filling them with visions of peace. But he did not rule as a king. Instead, he walked unseen, guiding those who sought wisdom, punishing those who abused power, and ensuring the world never again forgot the ones who had come before. And so, the legend of Ukemdili, the eternal one, was born, the child who had become the bridge between worlds, the last of the forgotten ones, and the first of the new.